Hey everybody, welcome back. So hey, by now millions of people have seen this video of the little girls interacting with the two big reticulated pythons, sitting on the couch with them, watching TV, getting down on the floor and interacting. And there's a lot of fear generated for the safety of the little girl. And I think there's a whole lot of misconceptions that all feed into this. So this is what we're going to talk about for anybody that's not a snake keeper. And we're going to talk about why she's able to interact with these animals like this. And maybe for the folks that are snake keepers, we can use this as a bit of a guideline of some of the ways to approach folks when they express these concerns about that. There's a whole lot that goes into it. And we've really got to go in depth on the behavior of these animals. So that's what we're going to do today on Intrepid Exotics. Whether you're a lifelong keeper or just getting started, help us encourage responsible keeping, conservation, and public education in the interest of keeping our reptiles safe and healthy as we protect them for future generations. You're invited to spend time with us as we experience these awesome animals together on Intrepid Exotics. Now, when we have the conversation with folks who see this video, some of the first things that you hear is that snake sizing her up, it's getting ready to eat her. You know, if that snake hasn't eaten today, it's going to eat the kid. That snake can kill her, it can constrict her and all this. And so many people are so concerned and they're frightened for the safety of the child that's interacting with them. Now, I'm not going to say that that's not a justified fear. And the reason why I say that is because for somebody that doesn't understand these animals, for somebody who hasn't been trained on how to read them, who hasn't spent the time working with them, that could be a very dangerous situation. You've really got to make sure that you know your animals, that anybody that you've got working with them that closely like that is also taught how to interact with them and so forth, because there's a whole lot of different variables when it comes to working with reticulated pythons. You'll hear the phrase thrown around quite frequently that these are wild animals. And I've had the opportunity in the past to work with wild-caught reticulated pythons. And rest assured, if you was to take one of those wild-caught reticulated pythons and put somebody in there trying to interact with it like that, that snake would get scared, it would get defensive, and it would attack whoever was there. The animals that are depicted in these videos, they're not wild animals. That's a common misconception. I know a lot of people may argue with me about it, but all you've got to do is go to Merriam-Webster and look it up, and the definition of a domesticated animal is an animal that's been bred into captivity for generations for the benefit and companionship of humans. And these reticulated pythons, the ones in this video, the one that I have here that I'm going to take out in a minute and demonstrate some things with, you can sit right here and look at her. She's running the glass, she sees me, she wants to get out and interact with me. A wild-caught retic wouldn't act like that. The ones that I've been around that were brought into captivity, if she was a wild-caught retic, she would be sitting in a corner, she'd be afraid of me. I would go by, she'd strike the glass, with those defensive strikes and so forth. And there's just such a huge difference in demeanors. And I know a lot of people they're really quick to point out differences when you use analogies. And I'm going to explain analogy before I even say the word that I'm getting ready to say, because I know there's a lot of people that will automatically sharpshoot the minutia of the statement without looking at it in a broader context. We use analogies when we talk with people about something because the person may not be familiar with the specific topic that we're talking about. But if we can draw parallels to something that person is familiar with, then we can maybe make that a little bit more relatable, and they can apply that same train of thought to whatever it is that we're talking about to help them understand it better. So this is why you will see a lot of keepers come to people and say, okay, we start drawing analogies to dogs. Now, it's a very legitimate comparison, and here's why. It's a really good example of how there's wild dogs, there's captive bred dogs that are just sweet as could be, there's captive bred dogs that you really can't trust. We've all had that experience. We've all had that friend that had that dog where when you went over to their house, there was like, you might want to stay away from his face. You know, you might not want to approach him because he gets kind of scared. He'll nip at people. He doesn't like strangers, things like that. And I know people will draw the comparison about the different cognition that dogs have as opposed to snakes and so forth. But that's not the point of it. We're not saying that snakes are exactly like dogs. What we're saying is that there's levels. And it's, you wouldn't take your kid and just go out and let them play with wild dogs that have never been around people before. The same way you wouldn't take your kid out and let them play with wild reticulated pythons that have never been socialized, never been around people before. The other side of that is I had a 130-pound German Shepherd, and that animal was very well socialized, very trustworthy. It had demonstrated reliable behavior throughout its entire life with us. And from the time my daughter was born all the way up until we lost the dog, to old age, they interacted together the whole time. And this is the same dynamic that's going on with this kid and these animals, because these reticulated pythons in his video, they were captive bred for generations. I don't know how many. I didn't ask Ed how many generations they were, how many filial generations for you guys that are familiar with that. But they've been captive bred. They've been raised with this family. They've demonstrated the same reliable behavior over and over. These kids have been exposed to those animals for 10 years without one negative interaction with them, without one bite, without one act of hostility or aggression or one act of defensiveness or anything. And that is how he's able to have trust in that animal, to be able to sit there. He's always supervised with them, always in a room watching, and he's trained his kids how to work with the snakes. He's taught them how to interact with them. This is how you approach them. This is how you pick them up. This is what you don't do, because a lot of people will bring in the whole, well, when their instincts kick in, when anything's instincts kick in. There was one time, that same German Shepherd that I had, my old boss and his girlfriend were over at my house, and he was laying on the floor, and she stepped over and she stepped on his tail accidentally, and he turned around and nipped her ankle. I mean, and that was a trusted dog who does stuff like that. A snake is going to act the same way. That doesn't make them unreasonable. It doesn't make them wild. It doesn't make them mean. It doesn't mean that they're trying to eat them. Anything. I mean, funny story, when my daughter watches this, she'll probably laugh. I started teaching her some things about fighting and stuff like that at one point. And there was one day where we was having an argument. She turned to walk away from me. I put my hand on her shoulder, and she just instinctively turned around and clocked me right in the jaw. She felt my hand on her, and she jumped, and that's how she instinctively reacted to it. Was it good? No. But even human beings have got instinctive reactions. So we take all of these things into account with any animal that we're working with. It's really super important that we understand that. Now, this animal, you can see, the longer we stand here, she's over there. She knows where the door to the enclosure opens up. She's starting to push on it. If she had a little gap there, she'd pry it open and come hang out with us. But what she's going to do in a second. But, one of the things that we talk about on here that's so hard to find the balance for, and I always say that reticulated pythons are one of the easiest pets to keep, and they're also can be one of the hardest pets to keep. And it 100% has to do with how that animal's been treated, how they've been raised, and how good the owner is at reading their behavior and acting accordingly. All of this stuff is really important, and it translates again into dogs. You've got some people who are expert level dog trainers who have got their, they can understand their dogs well enough to have them react certain ways and do really, really cool things. We're not quite to that point with the snakes. We can't train them to sit up and roll over and play dead and whatnot. But we can communicate with them in a couple different ways, and they communicate with us too in some very simple but really important ways. Now, you'll see in the wild, and there's so many dichotomies to snakes that it really takes a long time to really wrap your brain around it, because even as docile as she is, and you'll see when I get her out, reticulated pythons, they are ambush predators. And this is something that plays in when you hear people talking about their sizing up their prey. You just need to think about this for a second every time you get ready to say that a big snake is sizing something up. And we're going to start at the point of ambush predators. Snakes don't have legs. They don't have the ability to chase anything. They do not size anything up. They don't have time to size anything up. If they needed to approach a prey item and get up there and study it and measure it up against themselves and see if it's going to go down, by the time they got close enough to where that prey item recognized them, that prey item would bolt. The snake can't chase it. Eventually snakes would go extinct if that's the way they needed to eat. They operate on an entirely different level. They've got a food response, especially reticulated pythons, who are notorious for this, where they'll sit there completely motionless. They pick up on heat, motion, smell, vibrations, all of that stuff, all of their senses, and they've got such an elaborate array of senses for prey detection. They silently sit there, and then as soon as a prey item gets close enough, any one of those things can trigger that food response, and they will immediately strike out at it. Now, though that even as tame as our reticulated pythons are, a lot of times that food response never goes away. This girl right here, there's been days where she's been in an active food mode, and I've went in there with the hook, and as soon as she sensed the movement of the hook, man, she soared right at it. So that's how they eat. That's how they capture their prey. They catch it, they constrict it, and then they swallow it whole. Which is another thing that may set people off, just because, every living thing's got to eat. Some people probably just don't like the way snakes eat. It is what it is. They've got to do what they do. But, excuse me. But once they've been snapped out of that food response, more often than not, they're going to go into one of two modes. They're either going to go into a defensive mode, where they're going to step back and they're either going to feel like they've got to fight, or they're going to try and run away from you. And either one of those are manageable, especially when you're getting a new snake and you're getting socialized. Those are things that you got to learn to work with. And the other mode is to go into a thinking or an exploring mode. If you look at wild animals, this is something that's really cool. We always think about what a tame animal should behave like, and a tame animal should behave exactly the same way it does in the wild when there's no predators around. Now think about this on every nature documentary that you've ever seen in your life. I don't care whether you're talking birds, Komodo dragons, monkeys, deer, gazelle, lions, tigers, anything that you can think of. When they're not actively engaged in hunting, or not actively engaged in running from something that's hunting them, their natural demeanor is typically either, like with primates, really social, or with other animals, it's just very relaxed, it's very calm, just kind of exploring their surroundings. And it's the same thing with these animals here. Their natural state is really relaxed and really mellow, and it's a side that a lot of people don't get to see, because it's just not that common that people really work with them enough to get them comfortable enough to where they feel like that. Now, before I get her out, there's a couple differences that you're going to find with this animal as opposed to the ones that are in the Sonny and Cher videos that Ed puts out, which are the two retics that interact with his kids. You're going to notice in those videos that those snakes are really slow and deliberate. They're just really mellow. And that, you'll find some retics like that. Those are good examples of it. More often than not, these animals are really high energy. That's one of the challenges to keeping mainland retics. That's why you see more people going into super dwarf retics and things like that, because these are semi-arboreal snakes. And I say semi because when they're younger, they'll spend a lot of time in the trees, especially the super dwarf versions of retics from the islands and so forth. They spend a lot of time in the trees. Of course, as they get bigger, you know, this girl right here being 15, 16 feet long, she's going to spend more time terrestrially down on the ground. But they can be a real handful to work with, because when they get out, they want to explore. They want to look around. They want to expend some energy. And I'm almost 100% certain that's what she's going to do. But I really want you to pay attention to something. For everybody that thinks these are wild animals, for everybody that thinks that these things are so mean and they're so vicious, this is the worst possible time for me to handle her, according to those standards. You know, I can handle her anytime I want to. I don't worry about it. But it's been 5 weeks, I think, since she's eaten. She just shed a couple days ago. So this is typically the time where she's going to be looking for a meal. And you know, she eats probably 6-pound rabbits, 7-pound rabbits, and I'll feed her about once a month, maybe a little bit longer. But you know, retics have been known to go 6 months up to a year without food. There's a misconception that, you know, if that snake doesn't eat today, then they're going to eat your kid tomorrow. Well, like I said, it's the dichotomy of these animals, because, you know, we talk about such a hot food response that they've got, and you got to make sure you're capping it down and everything, so you don't stick your hand in and get wrapped up and so forth. But on the other side of that coin, these animals will go 6 months without food sometimes. So, like I said, there's just a lot of nuance to it, and it's something that makes it kind of hard for people that aren't familiar with these animals to really wrap their head around. And one of the big reasons why I'm making this is that, you know, it's so easy for us as keepers to get into the habit of, when somebody criticizes us keeping or us interacting or letting kids interact with them, you know, our knee-jerk reaction is just like, dude, don't even speak on this topic, go educate yourself. Well, it's not really fair, because the reason why they're saying those things is probably because they did educate themselves. You know, you see things like Jay Brewer out there where he's got, you know, the 20-foot retic sitting on the eggs, and he's instigating them, making them fight, and making them look mean. And they watch the nature documentaries, and everybody wants to see what's the biggest snake, and they want to see videos of, you know, this snake ate this person and so forth. And that stuff has happened. There are some really big animals out there in the wild, and some really small people. So that is possible. You know, it's something no honest keeper is going to deny. That being said, I can't think of any time in captivity where a responsible keeper working with these animals the way they're supposed to be worked with has gotten killed. Now, we have heard of some people doing some irresponsible things, but you do an irresponsible thing with anything, it can end up really bad. Same thing with these animals. You know, people talk about use common sense. It's not just common sense with them. You've got to actually educate yourself. You've got to learn. And there, see, I just said it again. It's a knee-jerk reaction. You've got to become educated. You've got to study them. You've got to learn them. And you've got to grow to understand the animal and let that animal trust you. So I'm going to get her out. And like I said, she's really high energy. I'm going to spend a few minutes here just wrestling her and so forth. But pay particular attention to the fact that she doesn't bite me. She doesn't strike me. You may see her wrap up and it looks like she's trying to constrict me. But one thing that reticulated pythons will do, like I said, semi-arboreal. You know, if they're trying to climb, if they're trying to reach something, they can't levitate. They've got to hold on with their body. And, you know, she will do the same thing. She'll hang on sometimes and constrict me, but she's constricting me because she's hanging on and she doesn't want to fall and she's trying to get somewhere. It was actually really funny. We was out in an event in Pittsburgh, and we had to get a 20-foot retic off of like an 8-foot beam. And as she's coming down off of there, as I'm getting her tail unwrapped, she just wrapped me up. I don't remember how many wraps it was. I didn't really look, but I know she got a solid grip on me. This is a 20-foot snake hanging on, supporting herself, and constricting. But there's such a big difference between a food constriction and I don't want to fall and hurt myself constriction. You know, the bigger the snake, of course, the more ready you have to be to deal with things like that. So, anyway, let me get her out. Come on, girl. See, she is so on point and energetic today. She's just... This is going to be fun. I'm going to wear myself out really quick, and I'm going to put her back really quick. Come on, sweetie. And you see I've got the hook out. This is just something that I do. I've worked with so many of these animals that, you know, you can always be surprised. Maybe it's a hot food response that you missed. I don't want to take the chance. But, you know, since her head's over there, and get my hand on her. Come on, sweetie. Come on out. Slide over here. Yeah, and these big animals like this, they are not for everybody. I mean, it can take some effort sometimes to maneuver these guys. And like I said, even though they're sociable, they don't have any malice, they've still got some mass. And she's wanting to be a little difficult. So we're going to get the butt out of there. Are you coming or what? Come on, crazy. She wants out and she wants to play coy. Come on. You guys get to see her being a brat. Come on, sweetness. No. You're gonna come out. We're making a movie. You gotta come out, okay? She's already got my leg wrapped up because she's being a butt. Not wanting to cooperate today. Why are you being a butthead? Is it bunny time? Come on. But for anybody who's afraid of these animals, I mean, look at her. She has got absolutely no malice towards me at all. You know, you can see how her body will lock up in different positions around me and stuff like that. It's because her head is periscoping out, and now she's going to check something out. She's looking at the tegu. No, you can't mess with the tegu. But this is one way too, where people will get in trouble, and you got to be careful because you can see how she's hanging on like this, and you can also see how I've got one shoulder free, and I don't have her wrapped all the way around my neck because, not even meaning to, you know, being in a position where she's just trying to support herself and hang on, she's going to constrict. She's going to, you know, lock in around you. So you've got to make sure that you don't let them get circumferential coils around your neck. You know, I'm not too terribly worried about them around my torso, legs, stuff like that. So you guys can see all this jostling around, all this other stuff. She's not even the least bit defensive, scared. She's not trying to size me up to eat me. She just wants to check stuff out. So let's go ahead, put her back in here so that I don't have to continue to fight her. Come on, sweetie. Let's go home. Okay, she's back home now. And I get to take a break until we get ready to take her outside later. I think she's going to go outside. A couple of my other ones are going to go outside and get their enclosure spot cleaned and water's changed and all that neat stuff before we go back to work tomorrow. But, you know, a lot of the whole point, like I said today, putting this thing out, is that there's just so many misconceptions about these animals. You know, if that was a wild reticulated python, you know, just like, you know, turn on the python hunters or something like that, where they're going after the wild Burmese. Those interactions are so much different. You know, the whole time she's out, that time, any other time, you know, if I'm trying to hold her and she's trying to get down and get away, she has never once done anything. She's never even acted like she wanted to bite me. And I've had her 5 years, maybe, something like that. And I don't expect her to ever do it. I mean, she trusts me. She knows what the feeding arrangement is. She knows what's prey, what's not prey. I never have to worry about her. Once I get her out, once I make sure that there's no active food response, even if she's got one, as soon as that thing gets turned off and I can see that her frame of mind changes, I can interact with her, and it never even crosses my mind the possibility that she's going to bite me. And that those are the relationships that we have with these animals. Now, we understand that people aren't going to understand that unless you work with them. But, you know, I really encourage people, if you're watching this and you don't have any reptiles, you don't have any snakes, you know, before you're really quick to jump on somebody, you know, I've even heard things so terrible as people saying, well, man, CPS needs to be called on and parents and they need to be thrown in jail. Really? You don't understand something. You don't know anything about it. But you want somebody else locked up because they've spent years doing something and they're able to demonstrate a side of it that you've never seen before. I mean, how ugly is that? Really? I mean, you know, we don't allow our kids or other people's kids or anybody else to interact with these animals because there's some huge risk. We do it because, you know, these animals show us time and time again through years and years of interactions that they actually do thrive on that interaction. My larger male over there, I mean, the male, I've got a 16-foot male reticulated python, and male retics are notorious for being scary animals, you know. And this guy is such a big baby where I'll take him out in the backyard, and if a stranger walks up, there's been times that he has run straight over to me and crawled up on my shoulders on his own. You know, I'm a real firm believer that any animal that can feel fear can also feel comfort. And if you provide that comfort to them, you just get to experience these animals in such a cool way. And like I said, you get to experience them in their natural state, of mind, where they're not afraid of predators, where they are well fed, where they are well cared for. You know, they're not full of parasites. They're not miserable. We control their climate. They've got plenty of food, plenty of water. They've got plenty of interaction, and you know, we actually do build relationships with these animals. So it's really important that, you know, folks out there, when you see people interacting with these animals, just take a second, slow down, and let yourself understand how much you don't understand about that interaction. And it's not automatically bad because you don't understand it or because you're afraid of it. So there's a lot more we could go into. I don't want to make this a really long video. Of course, I always encourage everybody, jump down, get subscribed to the channel really quick before you go. I've also got a Patreon and the channel memberships if you want to support the channel, help us keep going, help us improve, help us get more stuff. That is a huge help. I run all of this stuff just off of my job with a utility company. So every little bit of support helps. But we've got some other stuff coming out here pretty soon. I want to run another video out, talk about Retic Fest, what we did up with Reach Out Reptiles up in Pennsylvania, which was a whole lot of fun. I know Garrett and them's going to put out a video. I'm going to collect up some stuff and maybe try and do a big live stream or something with some of the folks that were out there, just kind of have a powwow about it, which I think would be a lot of fun. But ultimately, guys, you know, this whole channel is about learning about these animals, being able to enjoy them, helping new keepers just, you know, learn how to manage them and enjoy these animals just as much as we do. So I really appreciate you guys hanging out, and cut reptile keepers some slack. We actually do put a lot of time and a lot of effort in learning and raising these animals. So you guys have an outstanding day, and we'll see you next time on Intrepid Exotics.